Hello there. Thanks for tuning in. I really appreciate you listening to my little journey. This is such a fun conference, and I'm really happy to be here. Um, my name is Ramón. Don't worry about rolling the R. Ramón is just fine. If you want to talk to me on Twitter, I'm Hola Soy Milk, as you can see on this slide. It's a pretty bad joke, and I apologize. It's Spanish for hello, I am milk. Yeah, I'm living in Vienna, in Austria, and I've been a freelance software developer for my entire career. I really consider myself a community member. I've been helping run some local and online tech communities for quite a few years now, and it's been an incredible ride. I think by learning from each other, by talking to each other, by listening, by sharing, we really help make things better for ourselves. I've also been a Mozilla Tech speaker for almost 2 years now, and that has been equally what an incredible journey for me to learn even more and improve as a person. So let's jump right into it. One of the things that I really love about freelancing is that it allows me to jump between different industries on an almost daily basis. I've been really fortunate during the course of my career to work with refugees, with restaurateurs, with doctors, and well, right around March, when things started locking up here in Vienna, some of my contracts went into a bit of a lull, understandably. And, when I was looking around, just checking out what's going on around the communities, I saw a message posted in the Vienna freelancers Slack group where somebody said, "Hey, I've got a client working for looking for a React Native developer, remote, freelance, and good rate." That's three things that I'm very happy with. So I reached out to them and I said, "Hey, this sounds like my kind of thing. I've been doing React Native for a few years now. How can I help? What's the situation?" So he gave me a small tour of the code base. It was written in React Native, naturally, and also in TypeScript. Pretty new to me, but I'm willing to take on a new challenge. And by being upfront with them, they were pretty happy with that. So the client tells me, "Okay, so we've got this app. We've had it running for quite a few years now, but it hasn't been updated in a while. And there's two things we would like to get going as soon as possible. One is 64-bit binary for Android. So they hadn't yet updated the app to be compatible with 64 bits. And Google is pretty strict nowadays about requiring that. And on the Apple side, getting things working with iOS 13 also meant that we would need to patch up a few things to make sure that it's helping with the numerous things that Apple has changed over the years." So I thought, okay, that sounds good. What's the code base look like? How fresh is it? And so I joined the project in March, right? The last update to the app, and by extension, the last commit, were made in just about a year before that. Okay. The React Native version that was being used at the time, now I don't know if that was the newest one, I don't think so, but it was pointing to React Native version 55. Fair enough. At the time that I was already well into my upgrade, the current React Native version was 62. It was about 8 minor versions behind. So I thought, okay, first thing I'll do, as I do with any kind of code base, is to see if it runs on my machine. So I fired it up, I cloned the code base, I ran the iOS build, and immediately I was met with the problem, could not find iPhone 6 simulator. Well, fair enough. Xcode tends to throw out old iPhones and stuff pretty quickly with each major upgrade. So I thought, okay, let's see how it works on Android. Android tends to be a little more backwards compatibility friendly, not throwing any stones anywhere. So I fired it up, and similarly, the app build immediately failed, telling me that something about Google Play services was not working. So I couldn't get the app running right from a clone. So I thought, Whew, this is gonna be a little harder than I thought. I remember saying to myself, I'm gonna have to upgrade the heck out of this. So, to clarify right off the bat, you're probably wondering, what is the best practice for managing dependency upgrades? Now, there are lots of schools of thought on this. There are lots of opinions. There's lots of books. There's a lot of talks. There's a lot of blog posts with opinions on what the best practice is. This talk will not be that. If you were to ask me instead what my favorite practice for managing dependency upgrades is, I might be able to give you something a little more concrete. I like to adhere to the school of thought that dedicating specific chunks of changes or a sprint to upgrading a few things, make sure that we're on the latest security versions, is vital. Martin Fowler, a seasoned software developer who's written some books that I really appreciate, said, "If it hurts, do it more often." I really liked this. It kind of emphasizes that, it's not fun, but it helps in the long term. There was another quote from a different time that I really thought resonated with how software development works for me. And that is, art is never finished, only abandoned. So, just to clarify, I'm not trying to compare myself with Leonardo da Vinci. My goodness, no. And I'm not saying that any kind of software I make is art. Okay, I'm not going to beat myself too much here. But I think a lot of this can apply with software development as well. Software projects only really finish once they're no longer being developed. In a sense, abandoned. Another question that I started wondering as I started writing this is, I don't know about you, but I get the feeling that a lot of people tend to think, a dependency upgrade, that's quite an ordeal. And I wondered why. Why is it so daunting? And I think the question of balance is what comes into play here. I think that, especially with React and JavaScript projects, which have lots of small modular dependencies, in a sense, it's not just you and your team working on a software project. It's you, your team, and also hundreds, maybe thousands of contributors writing software in third-party dependencies. And managing these is kind of like a game of Jenga. You have to make sure that things are balanced and they don't topple over. And it becomes even more difficult when these dependencies have dependencies on one another. Say, for example, if I want to run the latest React Native, it would really be sensible for me to also upgrade React. So I tried to condense this experience into 5 lessons. The first of which might seem a little obvious or even cheesy, but bear with me. You're not alone. The great thing about this open source, one of the great things about working with open source software is that we can all share these experiences. We can all share these pain points and even share solutions to mitigate these pain points. One initiative I found from the React Native community is the React Native Upgrade Helper. Some of you might have seen this before. I'm told it was presented at last year's conference. How cool is that? So what this is a tool that helps you, as the name implies, upgrade your React Native version. And it was really cool because I was able to specify what my current React Native version is. You can see on this screenshot, I've set it to 0.55.4 and then pointed to which version I would like to upgrade to. So I went straight to React Native 62. And what it spits out is a series of instructions as well as diffs. Diffs of what? Well, diffs of the core files that come out of initializing a React Native upgrade app. Things like your package.json, as you can see in this screenshot, some scripts, some dependencies that that are pre-pointed to by creating a new React Native app. And you can use this to just make sure that your build files, your Gradle, your Xcode configurations are in line with what the React Native community expects is sort of a baseline for what you're doing when you're building a new React Native app. Now, of course, this isn't meant to be a catch-all. If it were easy, then it would be even more straightforward. So you might be wondering, if I'm not alone, how can I contribute? I think quite firmly that already by undergoing such a procedure of upgrading, you already have a wealth of experience and some unique takes from your perspective that you can apply to someone else who's about to go this for the first time. I like to think that these kinds of contributions would really, if they can affect me from 2, 3, 4 months ago, maybe even longer, then I've already done something good. This can take the shape of, well, a book, a blog post, a talk. When I did this back in April, I wrote a blog post, which has the content of what you're reading, what you're listening to today. Let's go into the next lesson I learned, and that would be to break it down. Now, I'm not a dancer. I'm not going to dance for you today. When I say break it down, I really mean break the problem down into smaller problems, kind of like divide and conquer. Kind of like setting yourself up to have a series of small victories. Allow me to expand. When I initially started this upgrade procedure, I thought, all right, what are the base things I need to do in order to consider this mostly a success? First, get the iOS app running. Once I've done that, I can then focus on the Android build. But until then, I will focus laser-like exclusively on the iOS upgrade. So I took that iOS upgrade and I thought, how can I break this down into smaller chunks? So I did. I adapt to auto-linking, fix compiler errors, fix broken UI elements, fix any bugs or crashes, fix compiler warnings. And by focusing on each of these one at a time, I was able to overcome them. And each time I solved one of these problems, pat myself on the back. Yes, I get myself a little motivation boost, and then I can keep going. So once all that is done, I thought, okay, now I can move on to Android. The list of problems will probably be very similar, and it was, for the most part. You see, I started knocking these out, and all of a sudden I ran into a crash. The React Native app wouldn't compile until I upgraded the React navigation dependency. All right, so I solved that. But that introduced a new issue. Now the app is crashing because of this new React navigation upgrade. So I had to jump in and solve that problem. Now you might think this could deter me or could be quite stressful, and I'm not gonna lie, it was a little bit. I like me a good video game, so one that came to mind while working on this was a very old video game from Nintendo called Greenhouse. And what you do in this game is that you're a greenhouse keeper, and you're making sure that your plants are safe from a series of bugs that are coming to munch on your plants. And so what you would do is you would go over to one of these 4 corners you can see and just spray the bug deterrent. And I felt that this was quite similar to my experience focusing on these issues. Sure, other parts might break, but no, I gotta get this part working first. And once I solved that problem, I could move on to the next. And by doing so, I kept myself motivated and I could stay focused on one issue at a time. Next came the question of knowing how much I should upgrade a dependency. For example, React Native, you remember I mentioned, was 7 versions behind the current one. So by doing so, you might wonder, why not just upgrade to React Native 59? Looking at React Native 59, that already solves the problem that I was having with Android. It adds that compatibility with 64 bits. Sure, I could totally do that. I also thought to myself, well, I could also upgrade to React Native 60 while I'm at it, because that introduces auto-linking, which is already a huge boost in productivity and makes managing these projects a little easier. But I thought, if I'm going to do that, I might as well upgrade to React Native 62. Why? Well, I thought, why not? With the mentality of, well, I am going to have to upgrade eventually because these mobile OSs keep updating and adding their requirements. It makes sense to stay on to as close a current version of React Native as possible. Keeping the stability, keeping it future-proof, and making my life as a software developer easier without compromising the user experience. Next was a lesson that was reinforced for my software development process. So I thought, hey, if I need to keep a clean history in Git and want to make my life as easy as possible, I was brought on to the concept of bleeding edge branches recently. If you don't know what those are, you can read about them in this link from the official Git book. And I kind of like them. What they are is kind of like a scratch pad in your version control. There, I was able to make tiny, very small commits, most likely broken. That's fine. I don't need to commit to. I don't need to have a commit that takes a very clear step to, and everything is working. It means that I can take these steps and observe how I have upgraded React Native and all the other dependencies to be able to determine that the app is working fine. This also allowed me, once I was done, to clean up the history accordingly, squash it, rebase it, all of that, as well as revert commits when I didn't need them. For example, maybe I broke something that didn't need breaking. I really liked that I could keep this in a sort of silo where I could make all the changes I needed without compromising the work of my fellow developers. Now, this last lesson I learned, and I feel like that's more of a discipline thing for me, was knowing when to stop. Now, I don't mean knowing when to stop for the day. I meant knowing when to stop upgrading. How much upgrading is too much upgrading, if that makes sense. See, in this project, there were 72 listed dependencies, which, depending on your experience, might sound like a lot, might not sound like a lot. But the truth of the matter is, I did not need to perform a major upgrade on all of them. For example, say React Native Vector Icons, which is a package for showing icons in your mobile app. I didn't need to upgrade to the latest major version, but maybe the latest minor version. If you're not familiar with it, this is semantic versioning, where developers adhere to a protocol that says the major versions are the API breaking changes that need to be dealt with. A minor version will introduce new features but not break the API, and a patch update will just fix some bugs. And what's important is, if you're not going to upgrade them now, doesn't mean you never will. I needed to be able to provide my client with a semi-timely result where I said, okay, I think this is ready to be deployed. So those are 5 of the lessons I learned that I could apply to my software development skills in other parts. But I also learned some other skills that apply not only to software, but to other parts of my life. Now, I'm not saying I'm ungrateful. On the contrary. One funny story is that when I was blogging about this and when this talk was announced, a friend of mine reached out to me and said, hey, I saw that you're, upgrading this. You might know him, Pablos. He's gonna talk about Xcode today. And when I saw that he was a contributor, I was so excited. Wow, someone I know, it kind of gives it a real tangibility. I don't know if that makes sense. It really taught me that I really should make more of an effort to reach out to people and say, hey, listen, I couldn't have done this without your work. Thank you so much. You changed everything for me. I think we could all practice that a little more. Another skill I learned was that of patience. I like to. I wouldn't say I would definitely not say that I'm the move fast and break things kind of person, but I do after a while get a little impatient when several days go by and the end is nowhere in sight. I start getting imposter syndrome and thinking, am I really fit for this line of work as a software developer? But it really helps to remember we've all been there, or we probably will in the future, and we probably will again. Another thing to take away that really meant a lot to me was the question, so now that I've done it, am I done? And what I've been implying during this presentation is, no, I'm not. When Apple launches a new iOS version with more breaking changes, when Android introduces some requirements, things are going to have to change, and we're going to have to be ready to upgrade our dependencies for that. Going back to that quote I used earlier, I'm going to just change it a little bit. Imagining if Da Vinci were alive today and, a software developer, maybe he'll say software is never finished, only abandoned. So listen, here's some links to some stuff that really that I wrote up, by that blog post I mentioned earlier, and some other links to stuff that really helped me on my journey. Listen, I'd love to hear back from you. If you've got any opinions, hit me up on Twitter. Get in touch. I really appreciate this opportunity to tell my story. I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you.